I'm Robert Sharetta, and this is the first episode of a new program we're calling The Inner Loop, Falls Church Access, that we are launching here in 2018. The program will be all about our town, Falls Church, Virginia. In this program, we're going to first highlight an organization, business, or someone who is making a positive contribution to Falls Church. And finally, we're going to open the microphone and our camera's eye to any citizen who wants to step forward and express their views on any subject, be it local, national, or international in nature. But now, let's get started with today's program. Hello, Robert Sharetta, and this is the Inner Loop Falls Church Access Station, which tries to focus in on issues, of course, pertinent to Falls Church and the entire surrounding region. We are very fortunate now that we're catching up with a delegate who represents us down in Richmond. He is Marcus Simon. Marcus, thanks so much for being with us here.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be on Inner Loop, and we'll see how this goes. Maybe you'll have me on again.
Well, I told you we want to focus on the Metro this time. We welcome you because you're not even running for election this time around, and you're giving us your time, and we thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, the Metro is something that you have followed, I know, as anyone who's been in this region for a long time. And I'd like to start about the importance of it to the overall economic development of our region. Obviously, since it came in the 70s, everyone saw that it was really going to be a boom, not just for the inner city residents, but for all of us in the surrounding states as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I grew up here and just outside of Falls Church, and remember when the West Falls Church Metro opened, and you've seen how much Haycock Road itself has changed, and how much the west end of Falls Church has been impacted. The new the University of Virginia Tech campus that went there because of the Metro station. So it's been interesting to watch. I mean, looking at Vienna, that was sort of a sleepy little residential area, and now with Vaden and everything, as sort of the terminal station. Watching Ballston, just emerge, and the canyons. From those of us that have lived here since the 1970s and 80s. So, having the access to Metro, having it as another option to get around, creating a sense of place in places like Ballston and Courthouse. In Arlington, you've got a lot of younger folks that are sort of living a carless lifestyle around here, and Metro enables that. So it carries a huge number of people too, back and forth. It's funny, I worked for Kate Hanley in Fairfax for years, and she used to say about Fairfax residents, they love Metro because it gets other people off the road and makes more room for their cars.
True.
But the fact is that, trying to imagine, we don't like the tolls and the congestion on 66, trying to imagine what it would be like without Metro.
True.
So, I think it affects all of our quality of life. It creates, and I think I want to jump ahead, but you're starting to see now that we've added another line, sort of just what an incredibly potent force for
the
development.
Silver Line.
A new line can be, right.
Yeah. Going to Tyson's now and eventually to the airport.
Right. Well, so again, having access to the airport's been great, and Dulles can't wait, and they really can't wait to have Metro get there and make it a better option and a more usable option for folks coming from out of town or for people to get to, so you don't have to go out and park, and it adds a lot of expense to the trip, and so makes people more likely to pick national. But it's it's been huge for it also makes us a real city. There's a certain amount of to be a real true metropolitan area and be connected that way. Having an underground metro system and trains to move people around is really key.
Well, if I can just take off on that point a little bit, since you brought up Arlington and the very density that has surrounded Metro, and by the way, with a very, I was there and even involved in local politics at the Civic Association level for a while, and I saw how there was a very concerted effort and a real architectural plan. I don't know if architectural is the right word, city plan, I guess, to develop that density along the Metro. We haven't seen that yet in West Falls Church, but there is now a plan for that to come. How do you feel about that plan now that you raised that?
I think it's great. In fact, I live on one side of Idlewood Road away from the Metro, and so I live in one of those neighborhoods where they sort of elected not to go with more density because of their proximity to Metro. I sort of see those as lost opportunities, and I think that around West Falls Church, the plan to maybe redevelop the school site and take advantage, after a while of that proximity to Metro is good. I like the idea of generally of sort of stepping down density away from the metro and the transit. I think it's good for everybody. Sure. And it's certainly helped home values in Arlington. If you're like 3 or 4 blocks off of the metro, you go from the
extremely valuable
condos to the townhouses back down to these single-family residences, but yet you can sort of walk to where you need to be.
That's right.
And I think it's smart development is the key. I mean, some people hear density and it's scary, and there's a sort of a reflex to be opposed to it. Mm-hmm. But I think if you can use those transportation nodes as a catalyst for some smart growth and plan it like in an intelligent way, it can be really great. So it's great to see that Falls Church City piece of it's trying to take advantage of that proximity to West Falls Church.
Yeah. So you would be for this idea of a real development plan that took advantage of that. Really, right now, fairly fallow land. That's sitting around. It's a parking lot. On this side is the education campus, but as you said, a lot of room for development there.
Yep.
All right, I agree with you on that one because I often wondered and scratched my head why it wasn't more like Arlington. But moving on, and you also brought up the Silver Line. The Silver Line now doesn't hit us at West Falls Church, swings down to East Falls Church. But the same sort of development could take place there. It astounds me in a way that there isn't more.
Well, we've seen it in Tyson's, and as somebody pointed out to me about Ballston and Roslyn, it took 25 years for that development all to happen. So it doesn't go up all at once. And so it seems like the priority or the early projects are all really hunkered around and clustered around Tyson's. Okay. We have the borough coming up. You can already see the change in the landscape if you drive down Route 7. It's starting to get very, very tall. So I think that Silver Line is having an impact there. I think actually the Capital One campus, they've just built an enormously tall office building. But I was over to visit a few weeks ago. But that's just the beginning of a much larger development, and they're going to have big retail. There's going to be a concert hall, an entertainment venue. So there's a lot that's still. They're going to have a Wegmans. All your viewers out there that are excited about that, one would think sort of a stone's throw of Falls Church. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of development that you can see. There's a lot of planning that people maybe still don't see because it's still a few years off. But it's been a great, again, sort of catalyst. So, Tyson's had sort of hit a stop. And then we talk about the economic value of having a metro stop. It's sort of gotten to its capacity without metro. Right. Now metro's opened up a new sort of level.
Well, all of this development that you're talking about would also help ridership, which has really become a big issue. And right now we see that, outside of all the safety issues that they've had, that they've tried to address over the last years, and to the consternation of a lot of commuters who maybe have given up on the service, let's say they have managed that to the point where the safety issues are no longer front and center. It's running as a smooth operating system. But the ridership is down. It's not just down because of that issue, but it's down because you've got Uber and Lyft, and young people are learning to get away a lot of other different alternative ways now, aren't they?
Well, it's interesting. As a small business owner, you never want to turn your customers away because it's much easier to retain a customer than it is to try and get them back. Yeah. Or to get a new customer after somebody leaves. Found
something else to move on to.
They've figured out another way, and they may feel, I'm in the title business. There's a title company just down the street that does just as good a job, So I think Metro made some mistakes. Unfortunately, they were in a tough spot. But I think that in the way they managed the safety issues, the budget constraints, the money that had to be diverted on an emergency basis to deal with some deferred maintenance and things. Sure. But that caused them to cut service and and put more time between trains. And it's become a very frustrating experience for regular Metro riders. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to get into a death spiral. Any business, if you start cutting service, you lose riders, you lose revenue, so you cut more service, and you don't want to get into that downward spiral. So
Well, I see they've just laid out a new plan to try to win those riders back, and there's a lot of good, sensible ideas in that plan. Longer hours, so people who are out in the evening can take the metro back and leave their car at home, which is probably good for everybody.
Yep.
And a lot of other incentives to try to $2 fares on weekends and that sort of thing. A lot of incentives to try to bring people back. But at the end of the day, they're also going to turn to the taxpayers for even more fund those ideas, aren't they?
Well, and that's the problem. It's not a business model that pays for itself, right? It's not going to be paid for by the customers exclusively. And so any big transit system everywhere requires some taxpayer subsidy in recognition of some of the things we've talked about, some of the public good that it does.
Maryland recently just coughed up sizable sums.
$154 million out of the state coffers as a dedicated funding source for Metro, which also gives them the ability to do some financing because they now have some bondable sources of revenue, so they don't have to do everything on a pay-as-you-go basis, which will give them some flexibility. But when I travel to Europe, when I travel to places where when I was in London for vacation with my kids the other winter, you could walk into a tube station and you knew that within a minute, another train was coming. And so you didn't hesitate to use it. The problem is, how do you get to that critical mass, right? And there is a lot of upfront cost to build a service to a level that it becomes so easy to use that everybody wants to use it. But there's an affordability issue in between. And how much are folks willing to cough up in tax dollars to support something that they may never directly use?
Well, and there's another issue too, and this is where I wanted to bring you because I think it's the one that's got to be addressed for the sake of everybody in this region, and that is, has the governance of the Metro been what it should be? We have watched for years and kind of questioned that governance before, because what we've seen, and I'll just account a couple of things that have disturbed us. First of all, no matter how you argue, and I believe working people should deserve a fair wage, but when I looked at some of the pay scales of some of the, not just executives, but I mean ordinary workers, sure, $80,000 is not a lot of money in this region, but what we noticed was a lot of people were bringing home more than 100 because they were getting extra hours, of course, and we started to wonder if those things were padded or feathered in any way that made a sizable number of employees, suddenly break the $100,000 mark to be a Metro employee. We just felt maybe it didn't require the full skill set that some other jobs in the region did. But beyond that, we also questioned the expense of the Silver Line itself. I mean, here we're looking at a line that was, I think, at 16, 19 miles for the first leg, and now it's another 12 or 15 to the second. But these were multi-billion-dollar projects. And, I look at what China is able to put high-speed rail in for. And sure, we're not China, maybe we don't have that cheap labor here, but the point is, it just seemed awful expensive on a per mile to me. For the most part, which is really a concrete project, elevated tracks, and even that has gotten goofed up, we found in one engineering report, and has to be repaired at some additional expense. So a combination of these things, we sit back, not just the safety issues, but these other issues, and said to ourselves, is there really the proper people steering this Metro ship?
Right. Well, I am very supportive of a plan. I haven't picked my favorite yet, to reform Metro's governance, get to a smaller board that's a little more nimble and it's more
accountable.
And more accountable. Right. Part of the problem is when you've got multiple jurisdictions appointing 5 or 6 people each, and you've got a bunch of non-voting members participating in all these discussions, to sort of just it makes
with a lot of other agendas other than just saving money.
Right. And so accountability gets diffuse, right? Because my vote was just one of 25. I had to do it because this interest group came insisting, that we address this particular issue. So, there was an idea floated for a reform board that would have Ray LaHood, a former Secretary of Transportation, kind of do almost like a control board, but since it would be voluntary, we wouldn't call it a control board, we'd call it a reform board. I think there's, last I've read, that intensive of reform is maybe not the direction things are going now, but a smaller board, maybe get down to about 8 members or so, and keep it on a size that people can hold somebody responsible for these decisions.
I like your thinking on this, and we don't have a lot of time, so let me push you ahead on this. You represent the 53rd district here. Do you and your colleagues have any say? I mean, can you push an agenda or nominate names to such a board that you have in mind in the future? Could you form a committee and say, look, here are 2 or 3 names we would propose that would make sense for that Metro board?
Typically that's those appointments are done by the governor, I think it's really the governor's purview. And so as long as we obviously have some influence on the governor on all kinds of decisions, and he has priorities and that he wants and needs the legislators' help with, and so there's an opportunity to have a discussion to say, hey, Governor Northam, this is those of us from the Northern Virginia area that are more directly impacted. Somebody like me who's got 3 metro stations in or adjacent to my district, from East Falls Church to West Falls Church to Dunloring. And actually, I go right out to Vienna, so I almost have 4. Here's what we think about how metro ought to be governed. And so I think there's no direct, we're the legislature in Virginia, we could put into the budget probably the names of the board members. I don't know that we want to micromanage the process to that degree, though. But yes, we have influence over it.
Okay, I'd certainly like to hear about that, and not just in some back office secret caucus in a smoke-filled room, but something out in the public for the public to see and say, look, clearly there are some people recognizing there is an issue here. This is what we think should be done about it. Okay, maybe you do it quietly with the governor, but if the governor doesn't respond...
Well, and I will say this about one of the metro reform proposals that I've heard on the board and the governance is to not make it a political spoil for somebody, right? Not just a political appointment for somebody who's donated a lot of money, but have a requirement that the people have some sort of technical expertise, people that have some knowledge of how transit systems and large organizations operate. And I think that putting some criteria like that for membership onto the board, that's something we could do legislatively. And I think it's probably a good idea, because I think you want, more than anything, you want competence, right? It's not supposed to be an ideological position. So regardless of what your opinion is on public unions and public sector unions and the value or not value, at least have somebody who's in a position to understand the pros and the cons.
That's right.
And not an ideologue about it.
And comparing to other transit systems around the country and the world even.
Right. Figure out what are the metrics, what are the benchmarks, who do we compare ourselves to, and how do we achieve the best outcome at a price that we're willing to pay. But look, anything we ask taxpayers to subsidize, right? I don't think people mind paying their fair share, but they want to know that their money is being well spent and well managed and not being wasted.
That's exactly right.
And so, I think that that's one of our really important jobs as public officials, is to be good stewards of public funds. And so we got to make sure that nobody's money is going to waste or being spent frivolously.
Okay, well then I look forward to hearing about your plan to transform the Board of Metro. Anyway, Delegate Simon, I really appreciate you coming by. It's guys like you that keep us informed, and we'll do our best to let our community know what's going on in regards to Metro. So thanks again for coming by.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You too.
All right.
All right, and that's all for now, except we have an upcoming interview with someone who represents a nonprofit who's doing good for the citizens in Falls Church and the surrounding communities. Let's go to that interview now.
Hello, my name is Jerry Barrett, and this is The Inner Loop. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Charlotte Gallant. She's with an organization that has a really unique name. I mean, it's catchy. It is for the sake of children. And I'm going to ask her to talk a little bit about that. And Charlotte, why don't you tell me anything you want about your organization and what you do?
Yeah, so For Children's Sake of Virginia is a primarily therapeutic foster care agency. So we work with counties all over Northern Virginia and take the children that they don't have the space in their homes for. So teenagers, children with medical or behavioral issues, sibling groups, non-native English speakers. We get a lot of those calls, and we work with foster parents of our own to provide extra training and support to those parents so they can really help those children most in need out. We also provide therapeutic services like intensive in-home therapy to those children who might be at risk of displacing from either their current foster placement or their biological home. So those are our primary goals.
Wow, that's a big list, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you do the work yourself, or you just more or less manage it, or how does that happen with all those skills?
Yeah.
Let me interrupt myself and just say you have a master's degree. And what area is that in?
I actually have a master's degree in global affairs, but I worked at the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children for a few years, and I really wanted to get my hands on more national work, more local work, so I was able to transfer a lot of those skills over from that.
Okay.
So I primarily do the recruitment and training of foster parents, so I work on all of our marketing, donations, everything like that, and gather those people who are really interested in our work and prepare them with the skills they need to take children in their home. We have case managers who work with those children and the families once they're placed, and we have psychologists and social workers who go into the home and provide therapy.
Okay, so and most of those people are on call, or are they permanently on your staff, or how does that work?
Yeah, we have a full staff of caseworkers for our foster team. We also have a whole bunch of part-time social workers and therapists who work on those in-home cases. So they all have a caseload of a certain number of children, and that fluctuates given kind of what the needs of the community are. So sometimes they have 6 children, sometimes they have 2, 8, but we try and keep the case manager consistent with the child so that child is used to the same person and can make sure they're building a relationship and have trust with the individual in our organization.
When I was walking around with a camera at the Fall Festival, when I saw you at your table, did you get many contacts there, or were people walking right on by? Because there were a lot of different stations along them.
We actually had a really great amount of people in the Falls Church area who reached out. So we had, I want to say 8 or 10 people who signed up, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's really challenging work. So we tend to have a lot of people who walk by or who are able to donate, but not necessarily able to foster or help staff our organization. But that was actually one of our best interested events. We've had a lot of people in Falls Church reach out, so that's really great.
Well, that was a positive thing then.
Yeah.
I looked at your website, and there are a number of people giving testimony to your services, and all positive, all very positive about that. So, and your website will appear with your talking today.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're located in Herndon, or where are you located?
We have offices in Chantilly and Woodbridge, but we work all over Northern Virginia. So we have foster families in Loudoun and Fredericksburg and Alexandria, so really all over the place.
Oh.
Yeah.
How did you happen to use that name?
For children's sake?
Yeah.
Well, our mission statement talks a lot about kind of maintaining a family and creating permanent homes for the children of Northern Virginia. So that's kind of why we do our work. We do it for the sake of children and creating that family. So that's where we got that.
I just think it's a catching title, really.
Oh, thank you.
Putting the emphasis there. We're just about time is up, so I want to thank you for coming by today and visiting with me.
Of course,
and
thank
good
you
luck
for
to you
having me.
and your organization.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Hello, I'm Robert Sheretta, the president of the Falls Church Cable Access Corporation. As you have heard, free speech and journalism are under attack. Charges of fake news are leveled from the right, and political correctness is demanded from the left. Well, FCCAC represents the citizens of Falls Church who wish to become television producers and commentators and wish to express themselves through this medium of television. Much of what you see in this television station is purchased by our nonprofit organization without any tax revenues from Falls Church citizens or others, just so ordinary citizens can speak their mind. And guess what? Many of those citizens are business people like you. In fact, we need your help, you, the executives running your small business, medium or large, to show your support for our station and the concept of freedom of speech, while simultaneously announcing your company's name to our television audience here throughout the Falls Church community. We call this arrangement the Falls Church Public Access Program's sponsorship. With a very small donation, you will see and hear your company's name thanked repeatedly during the broadcast day. Your company will be acknowledged for making our programming possible and for defending the right of citizens to exercise their right to free speech, the bedrock of American democracy. So let's get you started with a terrific way to gain visibility for your company while simultaneously supporting this worthy cause. You see the information below, and you can call or email us with any questions you might have about our rates and how your company's announcement may appear. It's time for you to support these citizens. It's time for you to support free speech. And it's time for you to show where your company stands. Thank you. Well, that's all for today. But stay tuned for future episodes of The Inner Loop when we explore why the budget crunch is so acute in Falls Church in Fairfax County, the death of Columbus Day and other historic symbols in Falls Church, the Metro's waste and corruption, what nobody wants to admit or even reveal. Finally, is Falls Church and Fairfax becoming sanctuary cities? And how much do we know about the history of Falls Church? So please return to our program to see these stories and others, and tell us what you think by emailing us at the address below. Thanks, and see you next month. Incidentally, let me remind our viewers that you will also see this program and many others produced here at Falls Church Community Television by going to our new YouTube channel. Just type in the search line Falls Church Cable Television and they will pop up on your screen for you to choose and watch at your leisure, anytime and anywhere in the world where you have access to a computer and the internet. So, tell your friends in Brazil, France, and China to log on and watch what is happening here in Falls Church.